Welcome to our weekly Torah portion, tidbit, brief morsel of Torah knowledge. This week, in addition to the fact that it's Shabbos like any other, where we read the portion of the Torah of Acharei, it also is Shabbos Hagadol, the Great Shabbos, the only Shabbos of the year that is designated as the Great Shabbos. Shabbos, any Shabbos, is great, of course. Shabbos is the holiest day of the week, but this Shabbos has a special distinction, and there are many reasons given. Perhaps if you go through the entire body of Jewish literature, you'll find hundreds of reasons why this is called Shabbos Hagadol, the Great Shabbos. I'd like to share with you two reasons. One, the Rebbe gave, based on the Midrash, that when the Jewish people were in Egypt, right before the Exodus, 4 days before, they were commanded to take a lamb and keep it in their home, getting it ready for the ultimate sacrifice, the Paschal lamb that would occur on the eve of their departure from Egypt. When the Egyptians saw this, it was quite unusual to see a sight of people running with lambs and tying it to their beds. They asked the Jews, what's going on? And they told them, well, there's going to be a 10th plague after the 9 plagues that they already experienced, and the 10th plague is going to kill all firstborn. And they knew when the Jews said things like that after 9 plagues coming to fruition that they were not to ignore these threats. So they came to Pharaoh, many of the firstborn, and demanded, let the people go. Why do we have to suffer so much? And Pharaoh and his henchmen said no, and a little civil war ensued. L'makeh Mitzrayim bivcharehem. The Egyptians fought against one another. Their firstborn, their elite, were fighting against one another. And that was a great miracle that happened on this day. And that's why it's called Shabbos Hagadol, Shabbos of the great miracle. That's the reason given by our great commentators of Jewish law. The question is, what is so great about that miracle? The fact that Egyptians fought with each other didn't help the Jews one bit. They didn't get out of Egypt a day earlier, not even an hour earlier. It had no effect whatsoever on their stay in Egypt. So why is there such a great fuss made about that miracle? And in a nutshell, the Rebbe's explanation is that precisely because the whole goal of the Exodus from Egypt, the whole purpose of being in Egypt and the ultimate departure of Jews from Egypt is not just to escape the travail of slavery, but it was to reach and affect even the lowest and lowliest aspects of life. Even the firstborn Egyptians, representing the elite of Egyptian culture, of Egyptian life, the power of Egypt, even they were willing to fight so that the Jewish people would be liberated. That is the ultimate goal that we are waiting for when we pray for Mashiach. We're not praying just to escape exile. We want to conquer exile. We want the whole world to recognize that there is one God. We want the whole world to stand up and fight when they see an injustice against the Jewish people. We want not to defeat our enemies. We want our enemies to fight for our own causes, because the enemy will recognize that there is one God, and that one God has a special relationship with the Jewish people. But I'd like to share another insight as to why this is called the Great Shabbos, because Passover, the Hebrew word Pesach, has several meanings. The conventional meaning, which is the true meaning, is that it means passing over. God passed over the Jewish homes when he killed the Egyptian firstborn. But the Arizal, the great Kabbalist, says that the word Pesach also is a composite of 2 words. Pesach, the mouth speaks. That means that there was something about our ability to communicate. Our speech was impaired. We were not only in exile in terms of our bodies, but also our ability to speak. Speech is what distinguishes the human being from other creatures. And when the speech is impaired, when our speech cannot be freely expressed, then we know that we are in exile. So Passover is when speech is liberated. But before we liberate speech, we first have to liberate a greater faculty than speech, and that is the faculty of thought. Compared to speech, thought is more powerful, it's more interdimensional, it's something that is so closely connected to our personality that we think of things that are close to our heart and to our minds. So thought is a more adult and more advanced form of activity, whereas speech is a lower form. So Passover is the liberation of speech, but liberating speech can only happen if our thought processes are also liberated. Let me put that in simple terms. Speech is impaired, and speech is said to be in exile when we use our speech to slander others. We use our speech to talk idly. We use our speech to brag. We use our speech to engage in all sorts of wasteful activity and negative activity. Negative speech is an example of how our speech could be imprisoned. It's not the type of speech that our soul really wants to be uttered. But in order to change our speech, it's not enough to say, I'm not going to speak ill anymore of another person. I'm not going to do things with my power of speech that are inconsistent with God's teaching. If our thoughts are allowed to wander without any direction, without any control, then our thought is also in prison. We are prisoners of our thought processes. So if you think ill of someone, as much as you try to control what you say, ultimately it will lead to speech that is improper. So before we get into Pesach and to liberating our speech, we first have to have Shabbos HaGadol. The word Shabbos means desisting and resting, that the Gadol, the greater, the more senior faculty of our soul, our thought processes, shall also rest and shall also be liberated. And when we liberate both the thought process and the speech, then we have complete liberation, which is what the ultimate redemption is all about. It's about the human being able to freely express every aspect of his or her godly soul's personality, whether it's thought, speech, and of course action. And the catalyst to that is the observance of Passover, starting with Shabbos HaGadol, the Shabbos that precedes Passover. Have a good evening and have a kosher and happy Pesach.